New pictures now of Donald Trump inside the car as he was being driven to the courthouse in Miami, waving to the camera. This was not long before he was actually arrested inside the building on federal criminal charges. Let's get some perspective on what the former president is going through today from some veterans of the Trump White House. Former White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham, former Deputy White House Press Secretary Sarah Matthews, both join me now. Stephanie, let me start with you. Trump, in some ways, seems to try to relish moments like this. He seems to try to spin the narrative. He talks about how they're out to get him because they're really out to get the American people, et cetera. But I have to say, in the images we saw from the Doral, he seemed rather dejected. What do you think, Sarah? What do you think he's going through?
I do think that there is a sense of normalcy sometimes in the chaos in Trump world. It's not like they haven't been through this before, not just with the first indictment in the Alvin Bragg case, but you look at the 2 impeachment proceedings that he went through. So I do think that they are kind of used to knowing how to operate in these kinds of situations. They know the drill. But certainly, I think this is to a more serious degree than what he's faced previously.
And Stephanie, what do you think?
Well, I would agree with Sarah. I think he's absolutely dejected. I think that was a perfect word for you to use. He doesn't want to be arrested. I think he even just said that on an interview somewhere. He doesn't like that. He thinks that it's not elegant. He thinks that it takes away some of his power deep down. So he definitely doesn't like it. But being Trump, he's going to double, triple down as he's been doing, and he's going to fundraise off of it. He's going to play the victim, as you just said. And I did think it was really interesting that earlier it was said that he's keeping people closer. I think he's got to be feeling pretty desperate right now. He doesn't have a lot of staff. People are scared. People are getting in real trouble. And I think that's weighing heavily on his mind as well.
Sarah, how did you see him treat classified documents? Does any of this come as a surprise to you?
This wasn't something that I was necessarily privy to in my role being in the press office, but I do think that if we know anything about Trump, he wasn't your typical president, and he didn't always follow procedures and the norms of the institutions. So I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, as this indictment clearly lays out.
Stephanie, Trump is not the only defendant today. His aide, Walt Nauta, is also part of the federal indictment. It is rare, but we have seen some people who were part of Trump world flip on Trump before. Michael Cohen comes to mind right now. But as of this moment, Nauta seems to be staying loyal to Trump. Do you know anything about their relationship?
Well, they were always close in the White House. Of course, he was his usher and personal aide, so he would be around him all the time. More specifically, when we traveled and go into the hotel rooms, and you get a lot of one-on-one time with the most powerful man in the world in a way that nobody else really does. So I believe that they're very close. But I think what people need to remember is, and this was alluded to in the previous interview, or the previous reporter said, Walt has got to be feeling trapped even a little bit right now. It is very expensive to have to hire attorneys to fight, of course, the justice system, but also to fight Donald Trump. He's famous for keeping people up in litigation. I mean, I have been subject to it, and it's terrifying. And if you don't have the finances to do it, you're going to take any free lawyer you can get. And then another thing I'll say is, to leave that circle has got to be scary right now too, because it's all hands on deck and the wagons are circling.
Sarah, do you think Nauta is someone Trump can trust, who is, in thrall, who believes all the crazy election lies, et cetera, et cetera? Or is it possible that he might flip? John Dean from Watergate fame was on the show yesterday and said that his message to Nauta would be, get your own lawyer and start cooperating so that you don't have to go down with the ship.
I don't know Walt Nauta personally, so I can't speak to where his mind is at and how supportive he is of everything Trump says or does with the election lies and things like that. But I do agree with that advice. I think if we know anything about Donald Trump, loyalty is a one-way street with him. He demands it from everyone, but gives it to no one. And so I hope that Walt Nauta is getting sound advice from his loved ones around him to hire a lawyer that is looking in for his best interest rather than Trump's best interest. And that's typically what happens when you have a Trump-paid lawyer. For example, you look at Cassidy Hutchinson, one of the key witnesses in the January 6th committee. She had a Trump lawyer at first, and they were encouraging her to do things to help out Trump, not to help out her.
One of the things I'm wondering for both of you, and I'll start with you, Stephanie, has to do with your reaction to the indictment, the description of how Trump behaved, bringing these boxes, showing off, according to the indictment, classified information to just people in the room with him, seemingly to push back on accusations against him or to impress them, telling aides to lie, according to the indictment, about turning over the documents to the FBI, et cetera. Was there anything in there that surprised you, and why? That's the big question. Why? Why did Donald Trump not just give these documents back? He would have avoided all of this. Stephanie?
Well, my short answer is no, not any of it surprised me. It all rang true. Even, why don't we just take those documents out? It wouldn't be a problem, right? That's so him. And then, I saw him all the time. The public saw him all the time. Think about when we were looking at, information about China at Mar-a-Lago and South Korea and North Korea. I mean, he talks about it all the time. Why didn't he give them back? It's because he thinks those are his. He's like a child holding on to his little toy train, and nobody's going to take it from him. My reaction is I'm very upset, especially when I saw those pictures. Jake, I practically lived at Mar-a-Lago. And so some of those places that I saw, I was even surprised for Trump that they could have been so careless with those documents.
We heard I'll go to Sarah in a second, but we heard Congressman Byron Donalds today and also Speaker McCarthy saying, Stephanie, the bathroom doors lock and you guys are making too big a deal out of this. There are 33 bathrooms in Mar-a-Lago. Stephanie, as somebody who spent a lot of time in Mar-a-Lago, is that right?
Well, there are a lot of bathrooms, sure, in guest rooms. That bathroom particularly was off a room that guests would play bridge and poker in. And so I guarantee when there were guests in that room, that door wasn't locked. And most specifically, the stage in the ballroom, that's the one that really got me. That ballroom is right next to a pool where all of the guests are. And it's got, I think, 4 doors that none were usually locked. And it was sitting on a stage right out in the open. So, I understand that they're trying to defend Donald Trump, but there's absolutely no defense for the way this was stored.
And Sarah Matthews, your reaction to the indictment and your answer to my question, why? Why would he do this?
I think that this indictment kind of perfectly encapsulates Donald Trump in a way that he would think that these documents were his. He called them my boxes. He didn't think that he needed to give them back. And that's what's so disturbing about this indictment is that he could have avoided this. It's 100% self-inflicted. If he had just returned the documents when asked, then he wouldn't be finding himself in this situation.
Sarah Matthews and Stephanie Grisham, as always, thank you so much for your perspective and your insight. Appreciate it.